The alien fleet commander Zixara stared at the tactical display with all four of her eyes, confusion rippling across her scaled features. The readings made no sense. According to every scanner, every probe, every piece of advanced Kethmori technology at her disposal, there was only one life form defending the critical junction of Outpost 77 Alpha. One human. "Scan again," she ordered her communications officer, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. "There must be an error in our detection arrays." The younger Kethmori's tentacles danced nervously over his console. "Commander, I have run the scans 14 times. The result is consistent. One human male, estimated age 32 standard cycles, holding defensive positions across a front that should require at least 200 soldiers." Zixara's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The Kethmori Empire had been at war with the Terran Federation for 3 cycles now, ever since humans had refused to surrender their colonies in the Outer Rim. The humans were stubborn. She had learned that much. They fought harder than any species should when facing extinction. But this was beyond stubborn. This was insanity. "Commander," her tactical officer interrupted. "The human is requesting communication." "Put him through." Zixara straightened, preparing to accept the surrender of this clearly delusional human who thought he could hold an entire military outpost alone. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a tired-looking human male. His uniform was torn in several places. His face was covered in dirt and what appeared to be dried blood, and his brown eyes held a weariness that spoke of days without sleep. But there was something else in those eyes that made Zixara's combat-hardened instincts twitch with unease, determination, absolute, unshakable determination. "This is Sergeant Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation Marines," the human said, his voice steady despite his obvious exhaustion. "I'm assuming you're here for the outpost. I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline your request." Zixara's translator struggled with the human's casual tone. "Human, I am Fleet Commander Zixara of the Kethmori 3rd Assault Fleet. You are surrounded by 47 ships carrying 15,000 elite warriors. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." The human actually smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've been holding this position for 6 days against everything you've thrown at me. I'm not about to give up now." "6 days," the tactical officer whispered behind her, checking his logs. "Commander, we've lost 37 dropships, 4 assault transports, and over 2,000 soldiers trying to take this outpost." Zixara felt her blood run cold. "That's impossible. One human cannot—" "Cannot what?" Marcus interrupted. "Cannot turn your advanced hover tanks into scrap metal using improvised explosives? Cannot pick off your soldiers one by one with a standard-issue rifle? Cannot use your own weapons against you?" He held up what appeared to be a Kethmori plasma rifle. "Thanks for the upgrade, by the way. These things pack quite a punch." The fleet commander's mind reeled. Her species prided themselves on being the ultimate warriors in the galaxy. The Kethmori had evolved from apex predators on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. They had conquered dozens of civilizations through superior tactics, technology, and sheer ferocity. Yet this single human had been decimating her forces for nearly a week. "What are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus checked something off screen and she could hear the distant sound of weapons fire. "I'm a United States Marine, ma'am, and this is my post. I was ordered to hold it until relieved or until I'm dead. Since I'm still breathing, I'm still holding." "Your reinforcements are not coming," Zixara said, trying to regain her composure. "Our intelligence confirms that the nearest human fleet is 3 systems away. You are alone." "Yes, ma'am. I am." Marcus's expression never changed. "Doesn't matter, though. Orders are orders." Behind him, an explosion lit up the sky. Marcus didn't even flinch. He simply reached for what appeared to be a detonator and pressed a button. On her tactical display, Zixara watched 3 more of her ground assault vehicles disappear. "How?" she demanded. "How is one human doing this?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried something that made every warrior instinct Zixara possessed scream warnings. "Ma'am, humans have been fighting wars since before we learned to make fire. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and shields, with bullets and bombs. We've fought in trenches, in cities, in jungles, in space. We've fought when outnumbered 1,000 to 1, when our backs were against the wall, when surrender would have been the smart choice." He paused to reload his weapon with practiced efficiency. "But the thing you need to understand about humans, especially Marines, is that we don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because we refuse to lose, and there's a big difference between those two things." Another group of her soldiers appeared on the tactical display, moving toward the outpost's eastern perimeter. Marcus glanced at something off-screen and sighed. "Excuse me for a moment, ma'am." The communication cut off, and Zixara watched in horrified fascination as her elite troops, warriors who had never known defeat, walked straight into what could only be described as a masterpiece of defensive warfare. The human had turned the entire outpost into a killing field. Every approach was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Every piece of cover concealed either an explosive device or a carefully positioned weapon. But it wasn't just the tactical brilliance that shook her. It was the absolute refusal to give up. Most species, when faced with impossible odds, would retreat, regroup, or surrender. This human wasn't even considering those options. "Commander," her intelligence officer called out, "I've been reviewing our files on human military doctrine. There's something you need to see." Zixara turned as the officer displayed a collection of historical records on the main screen, images of humans fighting in impossible situations against overwhelming odds, often while outnumbered by factors that would make any sane military commander retreat. "This appears to be normal behavior for their species," the officer continued. "In their history, small groups of humans have held defensive positions against forces hundreds of times their size. Sometimes they win, sometimes they die, but they never run." The communication channel crackled back to life. Marcus reappeared, wiping blood from a new cut on his forehead. "Sorry about that. Where were we?" "Your species is insane," Zixara said flatly. "Yeah, we get that a lot." Marcus checked his ammunition count. "Look, Commander, I can do this all day. Actually, I can do this all week if I have to. You want this outpost? You're going to have to come and take it. Fair warning, though, it's going to cost you more than you're probably willing to pay." Zixara looked at her casualty reports. In 6 days, this one human had inflicted losses that some entire campaigns hadn't produced. Her warriors were starting to whisper about demons and ghosts. Morale was dropping by the hour. "What would it take for you to surrender?" she asked. Marcus actually laughed. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. I'm not defending this outpost because I think it's strategically important. I'm not defending it because I think I can win. I'm defending it because a long time ago, I swore an oath to defend humanity's worlds against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath doesn't come with an expiration date, and it doesn't come with an escape clause for impossible odds." He stood up, and for the first time, Zixara could see the full extent of the human's defensive preparations. The outpost looked like something from a nightmare: twisted metal, improvised fortifications, and the scattered remains of her assault forces. "I'm going to keep killing your people until you decide this rock isn't worth the cost," Marcus continued, "or until you kill me. Those are your only 2 options." The communication ended, and Zixara was left staring at the tactical display. One human, one impossible, stubborn, absolutely insane human standing between her and victory. For the first time in her military career, Fleet Commander Zixara began to wonder if winning was worth the price. The War Council chamber aboard the Kethmori flagship felt smaller than usual as Fleet Commander Zixara faced her senior officers. 7 days had passed since they had first encountered the lone human, and the mood had shifted from confident anticipation to something approaching dread. "Report," she commanded, though she already knew the numbers would be grim. Sub-Commander Veltar, her most experienced ground assault leader, stood with obvious reluctance. 2 of his 4 arms were in medical braces, souvenirs from his attempt to personally lead a strike team against the humans' position. "Losses continue to mount, Commander. We've now lost 63 dropships, 7 heavy assault vehicles, and 3,412 soldiers. Medical reports indicate another 800 wounded, many with injuries that will require extensive rehabilitation." Zixara's tail lashed with frustration. "Against one human." "One very resourceful human," corrected her intelligence officer. "Our behavioral analysis suggests that Sergeant Chen has not slept for more than 2 hours at a time in the past week. He appears to survive on combat stimulants and what humans call spite." "Spite?" "A human emotion characterized by doing something difficult or dangerous purely to prove it can be done, often in defiance of authority or logic." Zixara felt a headache building behind her primary eyes. "You're telling me this human is destroying my fleet out of petty revenge?" "Not revenge, Commander. Duty." The intelligence officer brought up a holographic display, showing Marcus during one of their communication sessions. Human military psychology is built around concepts that most species find incomprehensible. They have a saying, "Death before dishonor." Our translators initially interpreted this as a metaphor. We now believe it to be a literal statement of intent. Sub-Commander Veltar shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, my warriors are requesting transfer to other assignments. They're calling the outpost the Human's Tomb. Some are saying it's cursed." "Cursed?" Zixara's voice rose dangerously. "You're telling me that elite Kethmori warriors, descendants of the apex predators of Kethmor Prime, are afraid of one exhausted human with a rifle?" "3 rifles, actually," the intelligence officer corrected unhelpfully. "He appears to have acquired additional weapons from our casualties. Also, several grenades, 2 of our portable shield generators, and what appears to be a salvaged heavy plasma cannon." Before Zixara could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The tactical officer's hands flew over his controls as he processed the incoming data. "Commander, we're detecting a massive energy signature from the outpost. The human appears to be powering up the installation's main reactor beyond safe parameters." "Put him on screen. Now." The hologram flickered to life, showing Marcus Chen in what could only be described as worse condition than before. His uniform was more holes than fabric. His face was streaked with soot and blood, and his hands shook slightly from exhaustion. But his eyes still held that same unwavering determination that had haunted Zixara's dreams. "Commander," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but steady. "I thought you might want to know that I've jury-rigged the outpost's fusion reactor to go critical. In about 10 minutes, this entire facility, along with everything in a 2-kilometer radius, is going to turn into a very bright, very brief star." Zixara felt her blood turn to ice. "You would destroy yourself?" Marcus smiled that same unsettling smile. "Ma'am, I've been dead since the moment I decided to stay. I'm just choosing how I want to die." "That's insane." "Yeah, probably." Marcus checked something on his improvised control panel. "But here's the thing. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. You asked what it would take for me to surrender. I realized I never asked what it would take for you to leave. You're threatening to blow yourself up unless we retreat?" "I'm not threatening anything," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. In 9 minutes, This outpost becomes a crater. Any of your people still on the surface when that happens are going to have a very bad day. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Sub-Commander Veltar leaned forward. This is a bluff. No rational being would— Sir, Marcus interrupted, with all due respect, you've been fighting me for a week. When have I done anything rational? Zixara stared at the human. Every instinct she possessed was screaming that this was impossible, that no creature would choose certain death over surrender. But she had also seen this human turn her overwhelming advantage into a bloody stalemate through sheer stubborn determination. What do you gain by dying here? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that somehow made the words reach across space and species barriers. Ma'am, back home. I've got a sister who's studying to be a doctor. She wants to help people. I've got a nephew who just learned to walk and thinks I'm the greatest thing in the universe. I've got parents who are proud of me, even though they worry every day about the choices I've made. He paused to wipe blood from his eyes. None of them are soldiers. None of them chose this life. But they're counting on people like me to stand between them and the dark. If I run, if I surrender, if I give up because the odds are bad, then what happens the next time? What happens when your people reach Earth? 8 minutes, he added, glancing at his timer. You could have evacuated, Zixara pointed out desperately. You could have retreated with the rest of your people. Yes, ma'am, I could have. But someone had to stay. Someone had to slow you down, make you think twice about how easy it would be to roll over human space. And when they asked for volunteers, Marcus shrugged. I was a Marine before I was anything else. Marines don't retreat. Marines don't surrender. Marines hold the line. On her tactical display, Zixara could see her ground forces frantically pulling back from the outpost. The energy readings from the reactor were climbing toward catastrophic levels. In 7 minutes, the explosion would indeed vaporize everything in a 2-kilometer radius. This accomplishes nothing, she said. We will simply move on to the next target. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but it'll take you longer. You'll be more careful. You'll remember that humans don't give up even when they should. And maybe, just maybe, that hesitation will give my people time to mount a real defense. 6 minutes. Zixara found herself making a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. All ships, prepare for immediate departure. Signal the ground teams to evacuate to minimum safe distance. Commander? Sub-Commander Veltar stared at her in disbelief. You heard me. We're leaving. But the outpost will be a crater in 6 minutes, along with anyone stupid enough to still be here. Zixara turned back to the hologram. Human, you've made your point. We're withdrawing. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Ma'am, you heard me. We're leaving. You can shut down your reactor. For the first time in a week, the human actually laughed. It was a tired sound, but there was real joy in it. Sorry, Commander, but I can't do that. What? The reactor's been critical for the past 10 minutes. I was bluffing about the timer. I can't actually control when it goes. Could be 5 minutes, could be 5 seconds. Marcus grinned. I've been sitting on a bomb this entire time. Zixara felt her world shift. Then why didn't you? Because I needed to know if you'd blink first, Marcus interrupted. Humans have a saying. It's not about winning or losing. It's about how you play the game. I've been playing this game for a week, Commander. I wanted to see if you were playing it too, or if you were just going through the motions. And you just proved that Kethmori aren't monsters. You're soldiers like me. You understand the difference between necessary casualties and pointless slaughter. Marcus saluted, a gesture that somehow translated across species lines. It's been an honor, ma'am. The communication cut off just as the reactor finally reached critical mass. The explosion was visible even from orbit, a brief star that consumed the outpost and everything around it. As the Kethmori fleet pulled away from the smoking crater that had once been Outpost 77 Alpha, Fleet Commander Zixara found herself composing a very unusual report to High Command. She would recommend that future operations in human space be conducted with extreme caution and maximum respect for enemy capabilities. She would not mention that those capabilities apparently included warriors willing to die just to make a point. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of Fleet Commander Zixara's report reaching Kethmori High Command. Representatives from 17 different species sat in the Great Chamber. Their attention focused on the holographic display showing the tactical analysis of what was already being called the 7-Day Siege. Ambassador Theiss of the Ethereal Collective spoke first, her translucent form shimmering with curiosity. Let me understand this correctly. One human soldier held a defensive position against 15,000 Kethmori warriors for 7 days, inflicted casualties exceeding 3,000, and then destroyed himself and the installation rather than surrender? Kethmori War Speaker Gorax, the most senior military officer their species had ever sent to the Council, nodded grimly. The tactical recordings are authentic. We have verified them multiple times. Impossible, declared Representative Vorth of the crystalline hegemony, his faceted body reflecting the chamber's lights. No single being possesses such capabilities. The Kethmori are renowned as the galaxy's finest warriors. Their technology is superior to human equipment by significant margins. That is correct, Gorax admitted, his pride clearly wounded. Our weapons are more accurate, our armor more protective, our vehicles faster and more maneuverable. In every measurable category, we possess overwhelming advantages. Ambassador Chen Wei of the Terran Federation, no relation to the Marine despite the shared surname, sat quietly in her designated chair. She had been listening to the debate for nearly an hour, saying nothing while alien species tried to comprehend what her people considered perfectly normal behavior. Yet you withdrew, observed the Zephyrian delegate, her gas form rippling with what might have been confusion. Your fleet commander ordered a retreat when victory appeared inevitable. War Speaker Gorax's mandibles clicked in frustration. Fleet Commander Zixara made a tactical decision based on unacceptable casualty projections. The human had demonstrated a willingness to continue fighting regardless of circumstances. Our behavioral analysts concluded that taking the outpost would require the complete destruction of our assault force. One human, Representative Vorth repeated, against 15,000. It was never about the numbers, Ambassador Chen finally spoke, her voice carrying across the chamber with quiet authority. You're trying to understand Sergeant Chen's actions through the lens of your own military doctrine. That's your first mistake. All attention turned to the human representative. She stood slowly, her simple diplomatic attire contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by most other delegates. Human military philosophy is fundamentally different from most galactic species, she continued. We don't fight to win. We fight because fighting is necessary. There's a distinction there that seems to escape many of you. Ambassador Theiss leaned forward. Please elaborate. In your cultures, warfare is primarily about resource acquisition, territorial expansion, or political dominance. The goal is victory, preferably with minimal cost. When victory becomes impossible, retreat or surrender becomes the logical option. Chen walked toward the holographic display, studying the tactical breakdown. Humans have a different relationship with conflict. She touched a control, and the display changed to show historical footage from various human wars. Images of soldiers holding impossible positions, last stands, desperate defenses against overwhelming odds. We fight because someone has to fight, not because we expect to win, but because the alternative is unacceptable. Sergeant Chen wasn't trying to defeat your entire fleet. He was buying time, imposing cost, and sending a message. War Speaker Gorax's head tilted. What message? That humanity will not go quietly into extinction. Chen's voice hardened. That every world you take will cost you. That every human position will have to be pried from cold, dead hands. That we are not a species that can be easily conquered. Representative Vorth's crystalline structure flickered with what appeared to be agitation. This is inefficient. Wasteful. One soldier cannot affect the outcome of an interstellar war. Can't he? Chen smiled grimly. War Speaker Gorax, how many of your assault fleets are currently advancing into human space? Gorax hesitated before answering. Operations have been suspended pending strategic review. Because one Marine held a position for 7 days, Chen continued. Because your military command now understands that taking human worlds isn't going to be the easy conquest they anticipated. Because Sergeant Chen's sacrifice forced you to recalculate the entire cost of this war. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. One human's refusal to surrender had effectively halted a galactic invasion. Ambassador Theis's form pulsed with newfound understanding. Your species uses individual sacrifice as a strategic weapon. We use individual sacrifice because it's who we are, Chen corrected. Sergeant Chen didn't die to send a message or implement some grand strategy. He died because he was a Marine, and Marines don't abandon their posts. The strategic implications were secondary. This is disturbing, the Zephyrian delegate admitted. How do you conduct diplomacy with a species that treats death so casually? We don't treat death casually, Chen replied sharply. We treat duty seriously. Sergeant Chen didn't want to die. He had family, dreams, a life he wanted to return to. But when faced with a choice between abandoning his post and dying at his post, the decision was never really in doubt. She walked back to her seat, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. That's what you need to understand about humans. We're not brave because we don't feel fear. We're brave because we feel fear and do what needs to be done anyway. War Speaker Gorax spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. Our analysts have been studying human military history since the incident. The pattern repeats across your entire civilization. Small groups holding against impossible odds. Last stands that accomplish nothing tactically but everything strategically. The Battle of Thermopylae, Chen nodded. The Alamo, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The defense of Stalingrad, Rorke's Drift. Every culture in human history has stories like these because every culture in human history has needed people willing to stand when standing means dying. But why? The question came from the youngest delegate present, a methane-breathing Jovian who had been silent throughout the discussion. Why choose death over surrender? Death accomplishes nothing. Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of human history. Because some things are more important than individual survival, because the alternative to resistance is extinction, and extinction is permanent, because someone has to draw the line and say no further, and because... She paused, thinking of Sergeant Chen and countless others like him. Because that's what humans do. When everything else fails, when the odds are impossible, when smart people would run or surrender, humans stand. Not because we're better than other species, but because we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. The session continued for several more hours, but the real discussion was over. Within days, the Kethmori Empire would formally request a cessation of hostilities with the Terran Federation. The official reason would be cited as unacceptable projected casualties and resource allocation concerns. The real reason would never appear in any official document. They had encountered a species that treated individual sacrifice as a normal response to military pressure, and they weren't prepared to fight a war against people who considered dying for duty to be unremarkable. Sergeant Marcus Chen had held his post for 7 days and died in nuclear fire. In doing so, he had accomplished what entire fleets could not. He had convinced a galactic empire that humanity was more trouble than it was worth. On Earth, in a small apartment in San Francisco, his sister would receive a medal and a folded flag. His nephew would grow up hearing stories about his uncle who saved the world by refusing to run away. And in the halls of galactic power, military planners would forever after include a new variable in their strategic calculations: the human factor, the unpredictable, irrational, absolutely terrifying possibility that their enemies might simply refuse to lose, regardless of the cost. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity that day. They weren't the strongest species or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced, but they were the species that would stand at the end of the universe and dare the darkness to try and take one more step. Sometimes, that made all the difference.